morning and welcome back to another episode of the Semi-Related Podcast. I'm joined by the co-founder and CEO of Terminal, Raghav Midha. Raghav, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's good to finally connect, Jacob. Yeah, we are connected on multiple levels, so good to finally get on the podcast and have some time to chat with you. Excited to be here and thankful for the opportunity as well.
Yeah, well, I'm sure connections are going to probably be a big recurring theme here. I didn't mean to make this pun, but sometimes they just happen. So you're calling in from Canada, right? So tell me a little bit about the office behind you.
Yeah, we're based in Toronto, Canada, where my co-founder and I we're both from. Have been building the company here. So we're downtown near Queen's University, and we're also in person. I know it's a not every company is these days, but we're in office 4 days a week. Today's actually Good Friday, which is a holiday up here in Canada, so the team is off, but I'm here in the office, and yeah, just got some balloons. It was somebody's birthday. We have some YC posters in the back as well because we went through the Y Combinator program and just people's desks and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the make something people want poster over your shoulder. Is there a
Yeah,
little bit of a story behind that too?
yeah, that's the like YC's primary motto is to make something people want, right? When you're the early stages of starting a company, it's easy to get caught up in fundraising or get caught up in business plans and get caught up in like overthinking a lot of different things and over strategizing. So they try to just cut through the noise and keep it simple and just have that mantra of at the end of the day, you got to make something people want, right? If you do that really well, then all of the other stuff will plug in. So that's was like yeah, kind of their mantra, one of the takeaways, and something we just brought the poster back home with us to have that reminder.
Well, awesome. Well, we'll circle back around to probably some more of the YC experience, but I'd love to, give a quick rundown of your background and then maybe lead that into how you came across starting Terminal.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, my background, we could start there and then lead a little bit into Terminal. So for me, a lot of different experience, when it comes to startups and entrepreneurship. I ran different businesses when I was younger, and then have a lot of experience in technology, a lot in e-commerce. Like that was kind of where I started my career, even running online stores and building software for e-commerce. And then moved into the fintech space where I led product management at a neobank company. And then, obviously very different, from like trucking, supply chain, logistics, but it does tie together. So I could tell you a little bit, how this came into the origin story. So I think the reason, from where I started and how my co-founder and I, Connor, led into starting Terminal was that our backgrounds together are a combination of trucking, logistics, fleet operations, and fintech. So on Connor's side, he's my co-founder and CTO. He very much grew up in the trucking space and industry. His family built and sold multiple freight brokerages here in the Toronto area, and Connor grew up in and around this, and also managed IT and software development in those businesses. So when he was younger, and even during his time in college, he was doing that. So he of course had a lot of exposure. And I think actually around the time that he was kind of like winding up his time there, and they sold their second logistics company, was around the ELD mandate. So there was a lot of buzz and
Yeah.
activity about like how this data could be potentially used and leveraged. So Connor had that personal background, and then on my side, my folks also in business. They own gas stations when I was younger, so I grew up in those businesses, and then now today they have an HVAC company and operate a fleet of 13 commercial vehicles. So these were personal backgrounds that we
Yeah.
had. And then we worked together at a neobank company called North One, Series B funded here in Toronto. And I was leading product. Connor was part of leading engineering. And then from there, we had experience of working together for multiple years, really wanting to start something with one another, and decided that let's explore an area where we have some unique insights and potentially an unfair advantage in a space that is not always typically looked at. So we just started doing research pretty broadly into, I would just say, logistics and trucking. Like that was a really broad sort of thing. We even left our jobs before we even had the idea for a terminal, but we just knew like we can't do this side of our desk. Like we need to actually like dive in, and that's the only way to find the opportunity. So the starting point for us was just, we have these personal backgrounds, we really want to work together, let's start exploring. And we spent a good amount of time for those first couple of months just doing a lot of research, specifically primary research, and talking to different folks. So we were going out to truck stops on the weekend, going to Brampton, which is just a suburb and a bit of a trucking hub here in the greater Toronto area. We would go to truck stops and talk to drivers and interview them. I was messaging dozens of people, maybe even hundreds of people on LinkedIn every day, trying to get them to hop on the call with us and just learn from their experiences. And in the end, we ended up doing hundreds of interviews. At this beginning stage, it was very macro level research. You need to kind of get that macro before you go micro and actually start solving a very specific problem. So we were asking people from just totally different pockets of the industry, talking to drivers and carriers and brokers and people in trucking and rail and ocean and air and people that are building insurance solutions and software solutions and all different types of things. And when you're kind of talking to people in different pockets, and you can really get a good lay of the land, right? So we're asking all of these different folks, what are the top three things of the industry? What are the top three worst things of the industry? How has the industry changed over time? What are top common misconceptions? And with this, you really get a good lay of the land of how are things today? What are the big macro problems? What's top of mind for everybody? And I think in this process, we kind of in the end had a list of 30 different potential problem spaces we may want to go into within the ecosystem, very broad, type stuff. But one thing that kept coming up was this challenge of integrations and interoperability between different systems that really kept coming up, for us, and that connected to our experience in fintech, right? So in the financial services space, you have a lot of middleware systems and APIs and aggregators solving for a lot of the infrastructure challenges. So we had that experience when we were building the neobank, right? We were able to leverage products like Stripe and Plaid and Middesk and Socure and LexisNexis on Fido, Persona, all of these different companies. And they gave us leverage where we could actually focus on much more acute market problems. And in that case, for us, it was building, banking for small businesses. But I think a lot of the products we have today, like Venmo, Robinhood, they couldn't have existed without that initial layer, right?
Yeah.
And so we found, similarly, huge industry, lots and lots of data, a need for more solutions, a desire for more solutions, people building and working on those things, but not the underlying infrastructure to give them that leverage. We were finding anybody building any type of product or software was spending 30, sometimes even 50% of their time on integrations. And it was typically even the largest team was the integrations team, right? I know even at Optum, you guys have a lot of focus on doing different types of integrations all the
Yep.
time. And it cuts across a lot of categories, right? Telematics is one slice of it, but the bigger ones are TMS and ERP systems and EDI and FMCSA data and fuel purchase data, all this sort of stuff. But that was kind of the macro insight that got us excited and interested in wanting to build a company, that gives other folks leverage. And before we even zoomed into telematics, we set the mission for Terminal, which is that we're going to be a company fully dedicated to accelerating the innovation and velocity of this ecosystem, right? As a result of Terminal existing, in a 10-year time period, we want there to be more products available in the market, those products to get to market faster, and their quality to be greater as a result of Terminal. And then I think we end up, diving deeper into telematics for, more specific reasons. But that was, kind of the origin story for my co-founder and I.
Yeah, I'd love to dig in a little bit too. You mentioned kind of all this research you did, right? You said you did a lot of first person trying to make all these direct connections. So go a little deeper on that. Who were some of the first people you were able to get in touch with, and what was some of the early feedback? I know you mentioned that integrations came up a lot, but I'm sure it took a little digging before you were able to connect the dots that was the core issue that was being faced by all of these contacts you made.
Yeah, yeah. Good question. I mean, it was a lot of different type of folks, and I think that was pretty intentional, meeting people that had all different types of roles within the industry. We talked to lots of different brokers, people at different levels within brokerages, from owners to folks that were in sales to folks that were in day-to-day sort of dispatching and operations. We talked to carriers, we talked to owners, we talked to dispatchers, we talked to safety managers, we went into offices and shadowed folks and talked to them about stuff. Like I mentioned, we talked to drivers. There was even a moment in which we impersonated truck drivers and went to a job fair, to talk to people about the challenge of
Yeah.
recruiting and retaining drivers. And then we talked to a lot of folks in the ecosystem that were building products or thinking about products as well. So we talked to a lot of founders, building TMS solutions or other types of products as well too, or had tried to build things. and then moved on to other stuff. Um, and then not even like, and then even more adjacent products as well, like insurance solutions or safety platforms or TMS platforms and investors as well that have been like really focused on the supply chain industry.
Yep.
Even Chris Henry, who I think was on your podcast, he
Yeah.
actually, like the way that we met him was I cold messaged him on LinkedIn and I said, hey, he actually went to the same college as my co-founder and I, Western University. And I said, hey, we're a couple, folks who went to Western, we're exploring the space. And he was one of probably the first 50 people we met. He
Yeah.
just like took the connection request and we got to talk to him about what we were working on. And he's actually like kept, I think, pretty well up to date too. So,
Another
meeting,
Canadian too, right? So that
yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah,
was
he's
on your side as
Canadian.
well.
Yeah, 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 exactly. So meeting these folks, and like I said, those questions we were asking them was really around getting a lay of the land. We were not, at that time exploring a specific idea. We were just trying to understand from them, like, what are like the macro tensions, tailwinds, headwinds from their experience, being in
Yeah.
the industry. And when you are doing that from like folks that have these different angles and lenses and perspectives, then you can really like get a more complete and wholesome view. And some of the top problems that were bubbling up, for us was like carrier profitability was a big one. This was a maybe a fertile area for us to explore. Safety, the rising cost of insurance, also a big one. Things are, and then data, integration, interoperability as well. So there's so many problems, that we can, we're thinking like we could further explore. But I think this one uniquely like stood out to us because of our experience in fintech and just having like that clear sense of understanding of how this can transform and how it should transform. And then I think
Hmm.
also just like personal motivation for my co-founder and I of like wanting to build a product that gives other folks leverage, right?
Yeah.
That was something that was like exciting for us. And even since then, like seeing that in real time has like been very, very energizing. And then, where we went from there in terms of actually getting feedback was we just said, okay, integrations, like this is a problem, to be solved. We put together some prototypes around this. Ultimately it was just kind of a landing page. Actually it wasn't anything more than that.
Yeah.
And we just sort of like articulated like some of these ideas of like, what about a unified API for TMSs or unified API for fuel cards or load boards, and took that back to a lot of the folks that we initially met for feedback. And then the thing that like came out was like telematics seemed like of all of those, the really clear opportunity to pursue. And I think that was for a few reasons. One of all of those categories of integration, not all of them, we really felt at the time, maybe things are changing now with AI, but at the time, like not all of them seemed like realistically feasible, right? Unified API for TMS system, seems quite challenging, right? Given how many of these systems are on-prem systems and the
Hmm.
level to which that they are customized, right? There might actually like literally be like 10,000 different versions of a cloud, right?
Yeah.
When you factor in like all of the customizations and all of the sort of stuff. So at that time, like that seemed very compelling from a demand perspective, but maybe the feasibility wasn't quite there. And then it looked different for other categories. And then I think for telematics, feasibility, was there. And then a very clear why now in terms of like the demand story, right? You have the ELD mandate driving like huge uh, like sort of like force in terms of adoption just over like the last 5 to 8 years, and then
Hmm.
other things as well too, right? In terms of dash camera adoption and the quality of those products getting a lot better, and then other driving forces like cost of insurance that's going up. That's also like driving the adoption as well. So you had this like huge wave. Data set is now really massive and growing, and even from here forward, it's expected to grow telematics usage, I think, between 20 to 25% year over year for the next 8 years. So like you
Yeah.
have this very big why now, hugely valuable data set. And then we felt that, if we're going to build a company that's focused on driving innovation, if there's any one data set to get really, really strong with and competent with, it is the telematics data, because it is the most valuable data set from the perspective of, every question in logistics is asking like, where is the truck right now? Right. And then all of the other, solutions that you could also, build around helping the carrier to uh, run their business more effectively, right, and
Yep.
improve profitability. So like that was it was the intersection of those things of like, why now, righteous mission, and the solutions that can be built with this that were exciting for us.
So you mentioned earlier too that I think you quit your job before you fully had the idea for terminals. So tell me kind of what was the tipping point whenever you said, yeah, this is something I want to pursue, and kind of what was the mindset shift as you're moving forward through that, right? So just kind of map that journey out a little bit too as well.
Yeah, yeah, good question. I think like the starting of it was just like Connor and I really wanting to work on something together, right? So, we were with a company before this, North One, went through a lot of growth with them. I think I joined when it was 30 folks, Connor joined when it was 40 folks. We went through Series A, Series B, worked on a lot of big projects over there. I think by the time we had left, it was more like a 120 person, size company. And then we worked on many different domains, and it was a great ride. But we always found a way to be on the same team.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to work with one another. And we've been exploring things for a while. Like we just had this small habit of, meeting up after work every Tuesday and just talking about different things that were exciting to us. And then that, turned into something a little bit more sort of like formal and actually like exploring potential ideas. But I think the challenge of it was maybe we did that for a couple of quarters, but you can only make so much progress working on this type of thing on the side of your desk, right?
Hmm.
When you're, founder, it's not quite the same thing as like, let's say like buying a business or a franchise, where you're going to be operating it. Like as a founder in the technology, you're literally going to invent something new, right?
Yep.
If you're going to do something that's going to be exciting. So it's tough to do that at the side of your desk. It's tough to do that, when your main job is at a startup already. So to some element, it was just getting to that realization: if we really want to dive into this, no time is ever going to be right, and we need to kind of go full time if we're going to make progress. So that was, I think, the realization for us. And then, yeah, I think like we ultimately just kind of made a bit of our bet on ourselves, and we said, well, we're going to time box it as well, and we went forward with it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and then we worked on this. It took us, in the end, it ended up taking us about like 5 months. I think from when we first left our jobs to actually having the first version of Terminal, which was just this tightened up like sort of like a landing page prototype, and actually like getting our first customers. So
Yeah.
it was in the end things moved along pretty fast in hindsight, but at the time it definitely was a risky move to make. And with the level of ambiguity that we were starting with.
Yeah. Well, tell me too, if after that 5 months, what was, the lean, mean version that you built, and then we can go into like first customers and what it's developed into today.
Yeah, yeah. So the first version was this, like, it was a prototype, really. It was just a landing page website prototype that was really just sort of outlining the concept. And then we had some mock API documentation, right? So essentially, what Terminal is, right? It's a unified API for telematics. There's many different types of ELDs, GPS trackers, trailer trackers, different devices and platforms out there in the market. And then we help to normalize the data, right? So the key thing, for us as two customers is that we're providing an API, that's essentially the product. So the first version was really just a mock API documentation. But this is all that we needed to just start talking to customers, right? So we chose to, kind of have a very lean prototype, start talking to customers and validate things before we actually move into the build phase. So that was the first thing that we had. And we took that landing page back to the folks that we initially met during our early research phase, the ones in which they would be relevant to potential buyers. And I think of the first 10 folks we talked to, 9 out of 10 said that this is a strong need. This is something that we would want. And then a handful of them actually put money down against the product before we even wrote the first lines of code.
Wow.
And this was not a scenario where we had deep connections with these folks. These were, for the most part, people that we cold messaged, or perhaps got warm intros from folks that we had cold messaged earlier. So that was like a good demand signal for us. And then we already had these sort of beliefs, right, in terms of the need for innovation, the opportunity with telematics, the why now, the potential use cases, and things that can be built out, and just like where is this going to go into the future. So that's where we sort of took the plunge in. And then I think the first 5-6 months of Terminal was we were just building out the product, and essentially it was the first handful of integrations with the main providers, and then building out the initial APIs, building out the infrastructure. That was really the starting point. And it was myself, Connor, and then we had a couple of friends that contracted with us, people we worked with previously, to be able to bring the first product to life. And then all of this time, it was really just him and I, working out of his apartment to make this happen.
Yeah. So then tell me about kind of hitting the next stage, right? You mentioned that you got some of these first people to sign before there was even code, right? They were that willing to support this idea, and there was such a strong need. So, what was the next phase? You start this out. You and Connor are building it. You have a few friends building with you. Um, how was it, going to the ELD companies and working with them? Was that much of a barrier, and kind of where did it first take off?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. So in the beginning phases, working really closely with customers from the very beginning, those early folks, that was kind of the sell, right? Which is that, hey, we haven't built this yet. This is the vision. We're going to roll it out with you, and as a result, you're going to get early access, you're going to get grandfathered pricing, you're going to get product influence and all of that sort of stuff. So they were definitely taking a pretty active part with us, and we limited it to a handful of customers because you don't want to go too wide too early, right? You want
Yep.
to, limit it to folks and go above and beyond for them. So we really had this, customer obsession early on and meeting them regularly, week over week, getting their feedback and building the product with them. So that was really the main focus. And we actively sort of like pushed off, fundraising, any of that stuff. We really just wanted to make progress on the product and then make those first couple of onboardings really successful. In the early days, I would say actually the telematics and working with the ELD companies was a little bit hard, actually. So we focused on the bigger platforms to start
Yep.
with, as of course you naturally would. And luckily these are like open platforms, right? Geotab, Samsara, Motive, these folks, they want you to come and build applications on top of their product. So we were able to get access to the resources that we need. Some of the folks we've met during our earlier research phase were carriers, that had telematics accounts and were to supporting us in terms of using that for testing and development. So that was great. But it was maybe hard when we would have deeper questions in the API. It's tough to get prioritized,
Yeah.
in their queue when you're, two guys with a landing page, right?
Yep.
So that was a little bit hard, but we were able to work through that for sure. Luckily, Geotab, one of the big companies is actually based here in Toronto. So we even had some connections there. Stuff like that is what helped us
Yeah.
to move along and get the learnings we needed to launch the product initially. Um, so that was like maybe the first 5 6 months. And then, by mid of that year, we launched the product with first set of customers and we got into Y Combinator as well. And then the focus from there was really just kind of getting to the, more customers, expanding the product and building out our advocates, really getting the first like uh, set of folks to really love the product and the company.
Yep. So how many people are kind of using the platform now, or where are you seeing adoption going? And then I think too that'll lead us into as you've gotten more ingrained into the industry, start to be around a bit, make some of these early connections. You can tell us. I think there's quite a few ELDs connected at this point, but
Yep.
what have been some of those learnings from that process?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So we just had like that handful of folks during YC, and we went through the summer 2023 batch. So we're coming up almost on the 2 year anniversary from when we started. Um, from there, we went from those, I think it was 4 integrations to start with, a handful of customers. Now we've got several dozen customers. We've got more than 150 integrations, and we're typically adding anywhere from one to even five per week. So continuing to make great progress. Um, and like digging into like some of the learnings is I think we've learned a lot about the use cases, that really exist today. At the surface level, unified API for telematics can mean so many different things to so many different folks depending on what they might want to build,
Mm-hmm.
right? You may have a TMS company, right? And they want to get access to certain things like vehicle status and HOS information and things like that a carrier needs for dispatching. On the other side, an insurance company, unified API for telematics, they want totally different things, right? They want historical data, they want high frequency data, they want safety events. They're going to be using this for pricing and underwriting and claims, things like that. On the other side, you maybe have like some fleets that are going through electrification, right? And they want to, use a unified API for telematics to get things like, do range predictions on their electric vehicles, stuff like that. So these use cases can be very diverse. So I think some of the early learning was actually understanding that, terminal is kind of like this portfolio of different products that we can be supporting. And with our R&D and building out the product, we need to make investments into specific use cases, because we can't do everything at once, because then you're going to go very, very sort of like wide with the APIs, but maybe not very deep in terms of integration coverage. And then also, from a business perspective, the enablement motion, the go-to-market motion, being able to go deep with all of those customers can be a lot, for small teams. So I think some of the learnings we had was just around, the breadth of the use cases. It was encouraging that there were so many more use cases than we expected, because like many more customers that we can be helping, but we had to kind of like start to prioritize these as well to ensure we're getting to the right level of depth. So that was, definitely a big area of learning. And where we're at today, some of the main segments we have a lot of folks around is insurance companies, definitely a lot of folks in this area. I would say like dispatching software and route optimization software as well. We have a lot of TMSs that we work with, folks that are doing load planning, route optimization, like the things, with Optim that we're helping you guys out on for sure. And then other products like fuel cards, invoice factoring, more in financial services. They have very interesting use cases too. And then the last one I would say we're in today is shipment visibility, right? So load boards or freight marketplaces or digital brokerages, wanting to tap into telematics data to be able to power location tracking for customers. So these are the ones we mainly focused on, but it's continuous for us to even be moving into expansion as well. Right. So one of the ones I'm pretty excited about we're exploring right now is getting into maintenance. So building APIs around engine state and engine hours and DTC fault codes and sensor codes. Right. So this can be powering maintenance related products and even helping some of the folks that are using us today for certain use cases like dispatching, let's say, provide new areas of value to their customers, or even like an insurance company. Right. They may be using driver behavior data today as part of their risk scoring and segmentation, but they could also be using like vehicle health data, as well. So, it's that's kind of like the use case learning is like, you make your first set of portfolio and then you can keep expanding on it. And then on the telematics side, I think also a lot of learning there for sure as well. I think that the things have definitely changed, as we've got much more gravity, in the industry. Like we're at a place now where we've, had hundreds of thousands of vehicles, sync data via terminal. So we're working pretty closely with the telematics providers to be able to power those use cases for our customers, for the fleets. So things have changed a lot on this end, so
Yeah.
with the large providers, like really deep relationships, and then with the providers that maybe we're not yet integrated with, way back when we would be sort of, chasing them down and knocking on their doors. But in this state, we actually have, I would say, anywhere from 3 to 5 telematics providers reaching out to our company every single week. And the reason for that is because they have fleets and carriers that are using their telematics system that want to connect to a product like an Optim or something else. And then our customers are telling them, sounds great. We want to serve you. We just need you to connect with terminal to get into the list, right? So that's a bit
Yeah.
of a network effect that's driving for us, which is exciting. So I think we had that, feeling that would happen, once you start to bring on customers, get connected to more fleets, and like the telematics companies would be more sort of coming to us, and that has worked out. And now we have, I would say, a backlog of integrations to push through as these people, come to us, and we're able to get them to like a dev ready state, integration ready state. And I would say, another big learning on that end is that we definitely, as we now deeply understand the different use cases we're in and the use cases we want to expand into, we also are recognizing a lot of opportunity to really help the telematics industry as well, and helping them to actually expand their APIs and expand their technology to capture the data that our customers want to use to power their use cases.
Yeah.
Right. Like one thing we found is not every system is exposing all of the data that somebody might want to build, with a product within the ecosystem. Maybe they're not capturing it, maybe they're not exposing it. And we spend a lot of time actually trying to work with the telematics companies to help them understand, these are the different use cases. These are the different ways in which different companies can be using that to provide more value to your customer, right? And we've been successfully going through the motion of having them improve their authentication methods to make it easier for the carrier to connect their telematics to different software services, getting them to expose things like historical data APIs, improve the frequency at which data is being captured and refreshed to power new use cases. So that's something that we're really proud of, because that's something that I think is we're actually unlocking new data for the market, which is unlocking more use cases and unlocking more value for everybody. So that's something that I think we learned actually during that summer during YC, and has been like a very exciting area for us to double down into.
Well, yeah, I think too. You're on kind of you've got a front row seat here to a really interesting challenge across the industry, right? Like you've talked about integrations being a challenge, but I would love to hear too about working with all of these companies, trying to normalize this data. How has that been a process or been a challenge? What are some of the learnings from that? And I asked that as I mentioned, you have this front row seat to optimization. AI is going to need, like you're describing here, clean data, more data. So Terminal is obviously going to have a huge role to play into the future of that. So tell me a little bit about what you've seen over the last 2 years on finding and connecting this data and normalizing it, and like you said, making it more accessible to everyone.
Yeah. Good question. I think there's different sides to that in terms of the areas that we try to focus and work on. I think the starting point is really working with our customers within the different segments we play in to really deeply understand their use case, right? And their data requirements,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what ultimately are they trying to power for the fleet and for the carrier? Like, if all of this works, like what happens, for everybody, right? What value is created? So we really try to deeply understand that. And then after that, like getting into, okay, what are the data requirements, right? Do you need history? Do you need real time? What does real time mean to you? What is the ingestion frequency? What is the GPS sampling rate? What are the different types of data you're going to need to get access to? And now that we understand the value you're unlocking, we can understand why these requirements are very important. Um, and then we as a team, just get truly customer obsessed and want to understand those things. Because the thing is, on with our work on the other side, we need to represent all of our customers, right? And being able to make sure that we're building the integrations and or unlocking the data to be able to power those use cases, right? So I think one side of it is that of working with our customers to understand those things, and we actually even will like document them, right? Document like, this is how Optum thinks about this is how so and so thinks about that. Like, this is sort of the must haves for them to provide the
Mm-hmm.
value that they provide. These are the sort of the areas that they would love to see new coverage or new capabilities around. Like, this is kind of their wish list of things. And then we regularly, work with the telematics companies on trying to drive for those things. And the way that we approach that is really just kind of like communicating the shared value, right? For example, if let's think about like an insurance company, for example, like to them, historical data is very important, right? Even for you guys, historical data is important as well, where Fleet Connects, you want to do some historical analysis to see where
Mm-hmm.
the opportunities, for quick wins or just, segmentation, all of that sort of stuff. Not all of the telematics providers have APIs for historical data. And it's not because they're not storing the data. If you log into the telematics dashboard, you will see, historical traces, all of this. It's just that they didn't have that understanding, maybe, or a clear enough understanding of what value could be unlocked if they expose those APIs,
Yeah.
right? So, by understanding our customers' use cases, the value they're unlocking for the fleet, for the carrier, the data requirements associated with it, then we can actually tell that story to the telematics company. And then it's really all about how can we actually help you to unlock more value for your customer with the data that you are harvesting for them, right? So that's kind of a lot of what the exercise is. So, and once we tell that story, tell that story to the right person, then it's just much more tactical work, right? In terms of like what are the right API patterns, contracts, to be able to support those things. But it's a regular motion that we're in. Like, I think at least a dozen times over the last year have we had different providers releasing new capabilities and things like this to be able to make new use cases that weren't possible happen for their customers.
And then, too, from your vantage point, where do you kind of see the future of ELDs and telematics? I know you mentioned earlier, like dash cam adoption is something that's growing. Where else do you see more changes coming to those types of technologies?
Yeah. I think like one side is adoption. Like, I think we're going to continue to see more and more usage of telematics across your different asset types. Um, So I think like trailer trackers, ELD for sure from a compliance perspective. I think everything we're seeing is that like the rules are more so expanding, the number of vehicles that the mandate is applicable to. And then dash cameras, I think, from what we are seeing, is on its like way to becoming something ubiquitous, like kind of across trucking for sure. Just because folks with nuclear verdicts, all of this sort of stuff, like really need to be protecting themselves and
Hmm.
protecting their drivers in cases. So I think on the adoption side, I think we're going to continue to see growth. That's something that we believe in. And then I think we're going to continue to see just like better quality data and better quality insights, coming from these platforms, right? For example, with the dash cameras, a lot of the focus for providers is AI and computer vision and being able to get better events, right around safety events of following too closely and crash events and things like this. So I think those things are going to improve, and carriers are going to get a lot more value out of those products, insurers as well. Um, Even like cargo trackers, they're able to detect things like, is the trailer door open and closed, right? And if it was open at the wrong time, there could be like an issue of theft, stuff like this. So I think you're going to get more signal and insight. There's going to be more adoption as well. I think that the devices are actually going to be trying to like capture more and more data, right? Just as we're talking about like the use cases are coming online, right? Terminal is helping to enable that. So we're getting a clearer picture of what the devices need to be capturing, right? The initial, like if you were to build a telematics company, like in 2015, and you're really only thinking about the ELD mandate, you're going to capture a limited set of data at a limited frequency. You're not thinking about the other stakeholders, right? But if
Hmm.
you were starting in that company today, you would be much more thinking about how is the data not just going to be supporting the ELD mandate, but how is it also going to be supporting all of the different use cases that the carrier is going to want to connect this data to, right? So I think that you're going to see the companies, because we're seeing it in real time, right? You're going to see them having better quality devices that are capturing more data, exposing more APIs, all of this. And I think for the carriers, it's going to become more and more an expectation that when they are getting telematics, that the data is very effectively portable between different systems, because it's going to be sort of expected that they're using it to connect to their TMS, to their route optimization software, to their safety platform, to their insurance company, to their logistics partners, right? So like that connectivity, I think is going to become a key requirement during the buying process.
Yep. And then too, I want to shift gears a little bit. Like I know you mentioned you're in the office right now, but no one else is there today. But what's it been like going from, just two friends building this off to the side and, turning it into a business and now starting to lead teams and scale and, take part in this bigger project and going from an employee to a leader?
Yeah, it's been, yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's been quite the ride. I think I mean, even in previous roles, like Connor and I were both in leadership too. It's very different, as a founder. Like the level of responsibility is much greater. But I think it's something that we have really enjoyed and just continue to want to have more of. And I think we're very fortunate to have like a really great team as well. I think that we've got like a lot of great folks throughout the entire company, even some folks that were previously in telematics as well. So I think that everybody's really been enjoying the ride, and I think that we do a pretty good job. We can do a better job of just like celebrating the wins, celebrating the moments. So that's been important. But I think the big thing is, I think that there's like really three things, when you're in a startup that keep you excited, keep everybody excited, and like keep you going. I think there's people, purpose, and growth. And I think for
Hmm.
Terminal, we've been like very fortunate to kind of have all of those things like consistently be themes, day to day and week to week, right? From a people perspective, we've got like really great folks, talented folks. We really tried to like, be very selective with hiring. Like we'll interview 100 people before we hire just one person, right? So folks that are, really skilled at what they do, really want the ownership, excited about the opportunity, and, you can just have the trust, right?
Yeah.
With them. So like, there's just like that right environment with the people. And then we do things like in office and having offsites, to help build like the bonds and the relationship. And then on the purpose side, that's something like we really feel every day, because we're driving very critical workflows for our customers, right? I mean, you can imagine what would happen for Optim and your users if Terminal was to go down, or was
Yeah.
Terminal was not to sort of meet its SLAs, right? People would lose visibility, into their vehicles and into their freight. Insurance companies would not be pricing, accurately. right? And that's a big deal, for them and for their customers. So we have a very, very like high level of responsibility. And what we consistently hear from most of our customers is we are, their favorite vendor. We go above and beyond. Like that sense of purpose is really there. And then the growth also has been really strong too, right? So we have, like our growth metrics, and we report on them weekly, and we have our dashboards, and it's just like exciting week over week to be hitting new highs. The one stat that I would share is, since we finished the YC program in September of 2023, since that time, I think now we've more than 20x'd our revenue and usage. We went from our first handful of customers to now having publicly traded organizations, household names, Fortune 500s as customers, all of that, without, any sales team. I think I only spent maybe 4 weeks on outbound sales. So the growth has really been a lot of like word of mouth, organic, and expansion with our customers. So I think
Yeah.
those three things have just kind of consistently like been present, which I think has been like the energizing force for the team.
Well, I mean, it sounds like a great culture too. I mean, you pointed out the balloons behind you too for someone's birthday, some little things like that. So,
Yep.
sounds like you have a great thing going there. And then over your shoulder too. I mean, I keep looking to as you're speaking through some of these things. I keep going back to the poster at the beginning too. So, what are some of the things too that maybe YC or other parts of the business has taught you that you might want to share with folks as well from the journey so far?
Yep. Yep. That's a great question. I love that one. Like, yeah, make something people want. Definitely it. That's like the key thing is if you just build a 10x better product and really go above and beyond in solving a problem, like that's the thing that matters the most. Everything else is easy to plug in after. Um, the other thing I think that we really learned, and it is also a big part of our culture too at Terminal, is just this mantra of never waste a crisis. The idea that, things sometimes go wrong, they often go wrong. This comes up in logistics all the time, right? But how can you anticipate those things, and when they come up, actually like use it into like turn it into an opportunity to win, right? So
Yeah.
like that's like a big thing I think in our culture, right? At Terminal is like, maybe something goes wrong with the customer in implementation, there's a miscommunication or a missed expectation, or maybe we have a bug, or maybe we even have like a small outage, rather than like, sort of like backing up and being afraid of it, how do we actually use that as an opportunity to strengthen the relationship,
Yeah.
right? And so I think for me and for us, like, we walk in not assuming that things are going to be great every single day. We're actually assuming like things are going to go wrong and things are going to go unexpected. And if you do that, you're not going to be surprised. And then secondly, when you have that idea of never waste a crisis, when those unexpected things happen, you immediately look for the opportunity. And then if you can execute on that and take something that like, was a bug or a poor situation with a partner or customer, and you can actually turn it around into a win, and then when you look back at it, you'll be very proud, as opposed to, feeling like that was a loss. So I think
Yeah.
that's been something that was, we, had a few moments, and we like took the decision, that we're going to do it in this way, and has like just become a part of like how we approach. And I think that is like a way, it's like a way more energizing way to kind of like build a company when you've got, you're literally flying and putting the plane together at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, I was talking to someone last night. I was at a transportation event here in the Dallas area, and someone who built some early routing systems. He was talking about a similar thing, but just in a different situation where they were still using paper for their pickup and delivery systems, and whenever they came back to the office at the end of the day, they'd have to go through everything and check where were missed pickups. They would call those
Yep.
customers as quickly as possible and try and say, "Hey, we know we messed up," and try to resolve it before those people called. Kind of like you're describing, how can we take, what might be a mishap and make it into an opportunity to grow that relationship? So I think that's a great lesson. But
Yeah.
so too, what are kind of the next stages for Terminal? I mean, where do you see the company, the business, the opportunities going in the next 6 months, year, 5 years, 10 years? What are some of the things you're looking forward to the most?
Yeah, yeah. I think in the near term for us, it's just continuing to build a team and continuing to grow. I think we've got really really good foundation in the first couple of years of building the company. We've got really really great product. We've got fanatical customers and advocates, and I think we've got like a solid foundation with with just like our operations and like the supporting the product itself, and then even on the go-to-market side. So a lot of the focus is actually just kind of like locking in the foundation and then starting to scale. One thing we're working through is we're looking to hire our first sales folks right now. So this is like kind of an exciting inflection point. So that's maybe the immediate thing. So excited for this. We're about to cross the 10-person milestone, so that's like kind of the exciting, like I think there's like 0 to 1, which I think we've done, and now we're kind of like solidifying our 1 to go from 1 to 10,
Yeah.
and then you go from 10 to 100. And then I think more broadly, excited for just kind of the product and the way that it's going to evolve and be able to drive more value for our customers. So for us, a lot of the focus today is definitely on market coverage, expanding into more integrations, more partners, working closely with those partners, and representing our customers. And how can we get those integrations to the level at which they're providing more utility and empowering more and more use cases. So we, even with 150 integrations today, there's still a lot more for us to do on this front. And as we start scaling, we'll be supporting more and more customers. So that's a lot of the focus for us right now. And then we have things in mind for like Act 2 and 3 in terms of what
Yeah.
we're going to do after that. So things that I won't share too prematurely, but we're very, very focused on like the coverage right now. But there's a lot more that we're excited to get into in Act 2 and 3.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. And I know we look forward to the partnership and sharing more information about what we're doing together and where that will go. So we'll have everyone stay tuned for that. But before we log off here, are there any other closing thoughts?
Oh yeah, good question. Yeah, we may want to edit this, but like any tips for me on closing thoughts?
Well, from the marketing side, I mean, it sounds like you're
Yeah.
you're moving in the right direction too. I think you guys are making a lot of responsible choices that can be hard to make. So I'll leave it at that for now, and we can chat more offline too. So
Yeah, yeah. On the tip side, I want to say something here.
here, I'll phrase it
Yeah,
in another way that'll maybe prompt you. If you were to go back 10 years, 15 years, and give yourself a piece of advice, what would you share?
Hmm. Yeah. If I were to, yeah, go back that amount of time and give myself a piece of advice, I think it would probably be, trust your gut, trust your instincts a little bit more.
Yeah,
I think there's just like this hidden intuition, but behind your gut, just it's the sum of all of your knowledge, all of your feelings, all of your brain, all of your heart. And if you can just, find a way to trust your gut and your instinct and unravel, a little bit what's behind that, I think that you'll learn a lot more about yourself, how you think, and then hopefully make better decisions you're happier with. So I think that's one thing that didn't realize till more recently, and something I'm very excited to keep working on. Just trusting your gut more.
yeah. I think there's something to we may call it like the heart of hearts that deep
Yep.
down there's something to this hunch that you have that it's hard to put data or articulation behind, but sometimes you just have to go with it. And I think those are the types of decisions that separate leaders from great leaders and some different things like that. But anyway, well, it was great speaking to you. I'm excited to have, learned a bit more about Terminal and to hear more about where you all are headed. So before we shut down, where can people find you? What's the best way to get in touch with you or to learn more about Terminal?
Yeah, yeah. So, folks can feel free to add me on LinkedIn, Raghav Midha. So feel free to send a connection and send a message anytime. And our website is withterminal.com. So you can hop on there, check out more about the use cases, things that we're powering, our integration coverage, API documentation, and then you can also set up time with us through our website.
Yeah, and I think that's actually how Optum came across you was I found the API documentation and shared it with Danny. I wondered if it was something that we might be able to use. So I guess your original gut hunch, like you were describing with that first prototype, was right. So
Yeah, I'm so glad to hear that. That's great.
well, awesome. Well, thank you again for the time. It was a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again soon. So have a good one.
Thanks, Jacob. Looking forward to the next one.